Before we start, just an announcement: if the sisters want to come in the corner to the side of the masjid on my left, they are welcome to do so. So if they want to see the computer screen, that might help them to kind of follow, not the computer screen, but the projector screen. That might help them follow along. So you guys are welcome to do so, inshallah ta'ala. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم ينفعنا بما علمتنا وعلمنا ينفعنا وزدنا علما يا كريم يا رب العالمين. What do you want me to tell them? For those who are upstairs, obviously we can see you through the glass. If you want to come and sit down here in the corner, you are welcome to do so. Those sisters up there, if you guys would like to come down here, you guys can. You're welcome to do so. Or if you want to stay up there and watch it from the suite level, that's fine. So going over the topic, inshallah ta'ala. Once again, to introduce myself, my name is Shahid Ali. A lot of you might know me. I'm the Director of Education here at ISOC. And alhamdulillah, we have this family of Friday Ummah nights. Every Friday night we have a program. And tonight that we have a program on the life of the grave. And when we talk about the life of the grave, it's not like a very joyous topic, obviously. There's a lot of seriousness. Can't really be lighthearted too much with this topic. There's a lot of things, obviously, that we want to know and will help us. All of us in this room is going to be going through that stage. And you probably know other people that already have gone through that stage. I think all of us here, probably in this room, have already attended multiple janazat, if you will, and know that it's a very serious situation. And everyone's also very curious what goes on. So we're going to try to cover as much as we can, just to let you know that I'm not going to be covering what happens on the Day of Judgment after when someone's resurrected. Everything's going to be due from the moment you pass away to what happens in the grave, and then up to when you're resurrected. That's about it, inshallah ta'ala. We could also do another section on going to other things if you like to. So things I'm going to go over, number one is going over understanding the nature of this topic, the moments before death, journey of the soul after death, how did that take place, reasons for punishment in the grave, and protection for the punishment in the grave. Obviously, we all need that. So one thing, first and foremost, is to understand what we're talking about. We're talking about the unseen, what's happening after death. So a lot of things that we're going to hear tonight might not be super rational. You might be like, that really doesn't make sense. That really happened? And you know what? Why? Because we're in a whole other world. The laws of physics doesn't apply to the hereafter. Okay? And so there you have to understand that some things might seem kind of off, if you will, because the whole different realm we're talking about. We're not talking about our life here on earth. We're talking about a whole other system. And one thing I want to put up there that all of us here all of us go through four main stages, as the scholars have mentioned. That all of us here. Number one is that before we were even born, we were all souls. Ruh, or arwah in Arabic. All of us were souls. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam mentions about Adam alayhi salam. Before he got sent down from Jannah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took all the souls of every human being that will ever live on this face of the earth. So all those souls were in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is also mentioned in chapter number 6, Surah An'am, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that am I not your Lord? And all of our souls in our body said, yes, you are our Lord. Even the disbelievers today, their soul said this at one time. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala waited till we were born in the womb of our mother's stomachs. Everyone here came from a mother, unless you're Adam alayhi salam or Isa alayhi salam or something like that. Then all of us came from our mother, and so we have a hadith where the Prophet said that after 120 days, after being conceived, the Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blows the soul into that fetus in the stomach of the mother. Okay? And so that soul goes from a place where, if you want to say in a place outside this realm of earth, we could say the samawat, if you will, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts it into the belly of your mother, or into you yourself, and then you're born in this earth, which we all right now are currently at that stage. And then we will pass away and we have the life in the grave. And the scholars use that term called dar al-barzakh. Right? It's a similar word that we use in Surah Rahman, where Allah talks about the two oceans, they don't meet. There's a barzakh between them, there's a barrier. And so the word barzakh literally means barrier. It's a world of a barrier. In Christianity, they have a term called purgatory. That's what they call it. And so basically it's a barrier for us to see the hereafter, Jannah, and of course there's Jahannam. Of course, inshallah ta'ala, we don't want to go there. And so it's a life of being a barrier kind of in the middle between this world and the next. That is called Dar al-Barzakh. And that's what we're talking about today, inshallah ta'ala. So these are the 4 stages we go to. Now we have to understand the soul. Each one of us has a ruh inside of us. Okay? This body is pretty much lifeless without that soul. If you, I don't know how many people, and raise your hand if you have ever seen someone pass away in front of you. Have anyone seen anyone pass away in front of them? I know it's an awkward question, but I myself, I've seen multiple people, and I mean not by my selection, but just have to be there in the moment, right? It is something just to see a body when it's passing away. And I haven't seen a body before of a person that's actually on a life support machine. They're breathing, but the doctor came in and said, you know what, he actually passed away like a minute or so ago. He's breathing though, but the body, if you take off the machine, it'll just stop. Meaning that a body can still breathe, but if the ruh is not there anymore, it's not alive. You understand that? So when Allah SWT takes out that soul in this body, our body will either fall and we go away, or if He returns it back to us, then we wake up. And that's why there's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, and also actually there's a verse in the Quran, I should say, where Allah SWT says that at nighttime, Allah takes our souls. And then if He wishes to bring them back, He brings them back, and that's how we wake up. And if everyone sees someone sleeping before, if you want, it's maybe a bad analogy, but they almost look like they're dead sometimes, right? Some people fall asleep all like in a weird position and their hands are thrown everywhere, mouth is open. Right? Even if you try to open up their eyes, they won't wake up because their soul's not there anymore. But when that soul comes back in the body, then they wake up and they come back to life. We call that the minor death, the scholars call that, al-maut al-sughra, right? So every night we actually go through this stage. We don't really feel it. We don't really understand it. Right? Hopefully we wake up in the morning, alhamdulillah, right? But that's how it works. So this soul that we have here, right now it's in our body, and then we'll leave our body, and then we'll go into the dar of barzakh, and we'll talk about what happens to our body afterwards. So I'll go and explain that, inshallah ta'ala. Let's go first and foremost, the moments before death. The moments before death, there's something that happens. And there's a very long hadith that goes into it, and I'll go into this, and I'll get into that, inshallah ta'ala. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions something in Surah Fussilat, that's chapter number 40, verse number 41, verse number 30. Where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about that when someone is about to pass away, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ قَالُوا رَبُّنَا اللَّهَ ثُمَّ اسْتَقَامُوا تَتَنَزَّلُ عَلَيْهِمْ مَلَائِكَةُ أَلَّا تَخَافُوا وَلَا تَحْزَنُوا وَأَبْشِرُوا بِالْجَنَّةِ الَّتِي كُنْتُمْ تُوعَدُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that those who said our Lord is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then remains on that path of following what their Lord wanted them to do, the angels will descend upon them, saying, do not fear and do not be sad, and have glad tidings of Jannah, which you were promised. The scholars have said, the scholars of tafsir have said this ayah is talking about the moment someone passes away. If they did istiqamah, that they always worshiped Allah and they kept up on that and they didn't like leave it and then came back, they had consistency. I usually use this ayah a lot when I speak about after Ramadan. We're really on a high in Ramadan, and afterwards we all know what happens. But if you keep that istiqamah up, this is a present that you will get, inshallah ta'ala. So Allah says that those people who say Allah is their Lord and they stay firm on that, they might go down a little bit, but they stay firm on that. Allah says that at the time of your death, angels will descend upon you. And the angels will say what? Do not fear and do not be sad. What do you mean do not fear? Do not fear what's going to come next in the hereafter. So they're assuring you of that moment. And we all know, like I said, if those have seen somebody pass away, that moment's very intense. If they're in the hospital, there's alarms going off, there's monitors going off, there's nurses running in trying to do certain things, right? It's very, very intense at that time. And the person passing away is probably doesn't know what's going on. They're feeling pain. It's hard for them to even talk and see their family members. It's a time you need tranquility, right? So Allah SWT says that the angel will come down at this time and say, it's okay, don't worry. Don't fear of what's going to come in the hereafter. It's okay, we have good news for you. And don't be sad. Don't be sad for what? Don't be sad of the family that you're leaving behind. We will take care of them. I don't know about you, but if anyone's passing away at that time, everyone's thinking about their family, isn't it? So this is the two assurances that a person who's dying is thinking about. What's going to happen to me? And I'm leaving my family behind. I want to see my mom. I want to see my spouse, my son, my daughter. So the angels come at that time. So here is actually an indication at this time when someone's passing away, they could physically see these angels for this 30 seconds, if you will. For this, 15 seconds, for this like one short moment, they will see these angels talking to them. And I remember my one friend, he was telling that his mom had an illness. She was in the hospital, and she had a back issue. So she was on her back for like multiple weeks in the hospital. And he said all of a sudden she got up from her bed and came up and sat up upright. And he said, like, Mom, you're doing good. Like, how did you do that? And she just looked around and saw all her family members and greeted all of them. And then she lied back down and she passed away. And I said, SubhanAllah, well, do you know about this ayah? And I was giving a khutbah that day and I went over this ayah. And he says, yes, that's probably what was going on. That she saw these angels and she greeted them. Everything that people greeted their family, and SubhanAllah, she went away. Allahu Alam was exactly what happening on that moment. But maybe you have tons of stories also about when people pass away, different things that happen. Things that, people have certain things that they never do, they do at this moment, and even with their sicknesses they have. So these angels come to them and say, nothing's going to happen to you, we're going to be okay. And then the angel of death comes, and you will be able to see the angel of death at that time. That would be very fearful, because he's not, as is mentioned in the hadith, not very pleasant looking, if you will. Because his job is not the best of jobs, if you will. And that has hurt him, if you will, in terms of his appearance. So therefore he will come and you will see him at these last moments. And then we get to a hadith about the journey of the soul there. That what happens there, the Prophet ﷺ mentioned in a very long hadith that's mentioned in Sunan Ahmed, Musnad Ahmed, where he mentions that if the soul is good, a righteous soul that worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, did what they're supposed to do, the angel will say, come out, come out. And then the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that soul will come out as water comes out of a jug. Just flows right out. Boom, comes out very, very easily. Why? Because our soul is, in each one of us, wants to see their Lord. You understand? And if our soul inside of us could talk sometime, it will say, hey, Shahid, let's get up and pray. Stop watching TV. Start doing this. Remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because that's what our soul wants inside of us. But unfortunately, it can't talk to us all the time. So we do things sometimes, our soul's like, oh, what is he doing? Or what is she doing? Right? So we have to make sure we care for that soul. And there's a whole topic of tazkiyat nafs and how to clean your soul. And that's another time for inshallah ta'ala to speak about that. But here they said, the Prophet says that if the soul is good, then it will come out like water. And angels, the same group of angels I was just talking about, will gather that soul, not the body, obviously, will gather that soul and wrap it up. And the Prophet ﷺ also mentioned in another hadith, where he said when the soul leaves the body, the eyes follow it. Once again, I've seen a person who passed away, they've been looking down, and obviously you see a lot of people when they pass away, their eyes usually look up. It's like almost maybe because of the joints of the eyes get loose and they look up. Medically, that's maybe how the doctors explain it. But the Prophet said the eyes follow the soul. That you will see your own soul as it's leaving your body. And you'll see it go up and your eyes will go up, and that's the last moments of a person. But if it's a good soul, the angels will come and they'll wrap it up with a garment from Jannah. There's a little indication here that our soul has a form. Because if you have a garment, you have to put it around something, right? So if the soul must have some type of form, if you will. So they're going to wrap it around with a garment of Jannah. And then they take it up to the samawat. Now, one thing I want to explain, and I really have a big issue with the translations of the Qur'ans, mostly all of them, because they always translate the word samawat in the Qur'an as heavens, which is a big misunderstanding. And same thing here in this hadith here, they translated that in English also. There's a difference between samawat and jannat. Okay? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that He made seven skies, samawat, above us. Okay? And so we're in one of them right now, but there's 6 more above us, or 7 more, sorry. So there's 8 altogether if you think about it. There's 7 above us. And then the Prophet says that this soul will be gathered up and it will be taken up, not to heaven, but these different skies, if you will, these different realms. How do you understand that? Like I said, I don't know. It's a whole nother world. And as it's going up these realms, just a little nomer, little note here, if you guys know the hadith about Isra and Mi'raj, when the Prophet ﷺ went up to the heavens, right? It wasn't heaven, that's another part. It was a different skies. And each sky saw a different prophet. If you guys know that narration, it's the same thing that what's going on here. And the angels will take up the soul, and other angels will see the soul going up. And they'll say, who is so and so? He smells so good. His fragrance is really good because that soul is a pure soul. And the angel will say, well, this is, father of so-and-so, if you will, and it will tell you the whole lineage. And they'll bring it up, and when they get to the 7th sky, before they get to Jannah, you can't get to Jannah yet, right? Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will say, oh my good soul. He said, wrap him up and send him down, but write his name in the Kitab al-Illiyin, the book or the record of the righteous. Okay, Surah Mutaffifin in the Quran talks about this. That there's a book of the righteous and the book of other than that, if you will. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, oh my good soul, write his name in the Kitab of Illiyin and send him down back to earth. And of course, obviously, just hearing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talking to you like that it's a pleasure, obviously. And being with angels, that's just something that's amazing to see. And then you will be sent back, and it's mentioned in the Hadith, that you will be sent back to your body in the grave. And we all know the Hadith very well, maybe a lot of us heard about it before, that when the last footsteps of the last visitor at your janazah, when you were put into the ground, of a person put in the ground, the last footsteps when they leave, that's when the 2 angels come and ask you the questions in the grave. What are the questions of the grave? Now it gets kind of serious now. You had a great time going up. When you come back down, it changes. It's quite dark and cold, 6 feet underground. And these angels will come, and they mention that they're large in nature. And they're very fearful looking. And they'll ask you 3 main questions that a lot of us probably definitely have heard before, where they'll say that, who is your Lord? What is your deen? Ma dinuk? And what do you say about the person, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that was sent to you? These 3 questions. And a believer will say that, who? My Lord is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then my religion is al-Islam. A way of life was Islam. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what do I say about him? He was a messenger and a prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is what a good person would say. Okay? One thing about this is that you can't just say it from your tongue because you memorize the answer. Okay? It doesn't work that way. Because this is your soul that's speaking. So whatever you train your soul to do, that's what it's going to say. If you train your soul to just watch the stock market all day long and TV shows, but alhamdulillah, you were Muslim, you prayed on everything, but you train your soul to do these type of things, it will say these type of things. Right? You can't really lie. You can't just make up things. Because now the soul, whatever it's been conditioned, it would say, my Lord was this, my Lord was my business, my Lord was that. People will say all different type of things. Right? So you have to train your soul exactly what not just on your tip of your tongue. And then it says after that, if the answer, the angel will say, a voice will come down and says, he has spoken the truth. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has confirmed what your answers, if you will. And then what happens after that, that the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that the grave will be expanded far as the eyes can see. We're all scared for a little grave and being there in the dark, right? All of us, that's natural, to be alone in a dark place. But Allah gives us comfort that it will be expanded. And fragrance of Jannah will enter in. And you'll have a bed from Jannah and garments from Jannah. Like you will have a very good, you'll be doing very well. And then a man will come with a very good face, very bright looking face like the sun, it's mentioned in the Hadith. And you will say, who are you? Are you asking more questions? What is this? He said, don't worry. I'm your amal. I'm your deeds that you did in this world. So by us praying and doing charity, we are giving ourselves insurance in the hereafter, or at least in the grave. Right? And this companion, because all of us don't want to be alone. We're naturally, humans don't like being alone. So when we're in the grave, we're kind of by ourselves. So this companion will come and say, don't worry. I know it's kind of scary. I'm here with you. Don't worry. And it will be with us. And I'll talk about a little bit about, do we get to visit our relatives in this Dar al-Barzakh, this hereafter in the grave? I'll get to that in a little bit, inshallah ta'ala. For the one who's a really bad soul, the same process happens. But the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that the soul comes out of the body like wet cotton gets pulled through an iron comb. Everyone knows a cotton ball, right? Everyone's seen a cotton ball before. If you pull it through a comb, forget about if it's iron or even plastic, whatever it is, what usually happens? It rips apart, doesn't it? Why? Because the soul knows what's happening. It's been trained to disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to not pray, to do this and do that. So it doesn't want to leave that body. It wants to stay here on earth. So it will cling on to your flesh and your bones. And the angels will tug on that soul and pull it out. That's why sometimes people scream and go through all type of pain when death is happening. Now, everyone's going to go through pain usually when death happens, just naturally, right? But people go through more, if you will. And then these other angels will come and they'll put it with a garment from the garments of the hellfire. And it will take it up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But before they get to the first sky, the voice will come down and say, send it down. Don't even come any more closer. And the angels will say, what is this bad smelling soul? And then send him down. And you'll be sent down into the grave. And you'll have the same questions. And of course, he won't pass that questions. And then it's mentioned there that punishment will come upon him. He will see a window of Jahannam. And then he will have a very tight grave. It will squeeze him. So this is one thing about the journey of the soul that we have from this very long hadith in terms of the Prophet ﷺ of what happens right after death and what happens to that whole soul. Right? That's pretty dramatic of all the stuff that what goes on after you pass away. Then we have just the life in the grave. There's a question of the grave, right? We went over that already. About the life in the grave that we go in ourselves. Description of the life in the grave. Number one, we have to understand that the soul and the body are two different things, okay? And there's punishment in the grave that we all see and that we just went over right now, and there's bliss in the grave. So I'll keep that balance, okay? And so here is to understand is that the soul is not necessarily actually in that gravesite. When you go to the grave, the soul of that person is not necessarily there. The body's there. It's decaying, we all know. But the soul is in another realm. Now, does the soul come back to that body? There's some opinions that yes, it does come to that body when people visit that body. The soul comes back to it, and then it replies back to the greetings of that person. Right? And there's some people that rejected that. But nonetheless, it's one opinion there. But I wanted to go over here that the clothes that you will have in that grave, that person will have in that grave, I already mentioned already, right? If you're a good soul, your clothes will be from Jannah. You will have very nice clothes. You'll have a nice bed. You'll be well relaxed. You'll be almost like in a 5-star hotel, even though it's Daru Barzak, right? But it's not necessary. Don't put yourself in the grave, in the hole in the ground. It's this whole different realm that your soul is enjoying. Okay? Understand that. Like I said, it's kind of hard to swallow, but we're talking about a whole different realm that we're talking about here. Okay? And then they're very spacious and they'll have their companion. That's how your life would be. Me and you, everyone. Inshallah ta'ala, of course, inshallah, we're all part of those good souls. Now here is that one question is that does the deceased hear? This is a big thing. When you go to the grave, whether it's your parents that passed away or a friend or something, do they hear when you come? And another question is that do they know that if it's you? And this is a question, this is a debate amongst the scholars, but the majority of the scholars of the opinion that they do hear when someone comes and visits them. There's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that says that when you come to the grave, you should say Salamu alaykum ahl dinar. That you say diyar. That you should, when you come there, you should say Salamu alaykum, O people of the grave. Right? Inshallah, we will be with you soon. And if you think about it, when you say Assalamu alaikum to somebody, that usually means that they're going to reply back to you, right? They're going to hear you. So the scholars took a point from this that if the Prophet was talking about how to greet them, that means that what? They could hear. There's another instance when the Prophet after the battle of Badr, he went and saw the mushrikeen, the people of Quraysh, they were dead on the floor. And after the battle, he came up to him and said, oh, so-and-so, Abu Jahl, and this person, that person. Did you find what was true? I found what was true. And he started talking to the dead. Umar radiallahu anh comes and says, Ya Rasulullah, are you speaking to dead bodies? He says, oh Umar, they could hear as much as you can hear me. The way you hear me right now, the same way they could hear me right now. Don't worry, they're listening to me right now, even though their body's dead on the ground. Some scholars said that was only special for that time or that incident. Some scholars said this is general. That people, when you come to the grave, that they will hear you, not to be there and have a long discussion and so forth, right? But there you make dua, you read Quran for them, etc. But naturally, people will talk to someone in the grave because obviously it's emotional, right? Whether it's your relatives and so forth. So that's there. So the deceased of the majority is the deceased, what? Can hear you, if you will. Now there's another question is that do they recognize the person, the visitor? And there's an opinion there also that they do recognize a person that comes to them. Right? When they come to them, they do recognize who that is and that voice. Of course, if they know that, if they're familiar with that. If some random person comes, they might not understand who that or comprehend that voice, if you will. But they do understand if that's your son, if the son comes, the daughter comes, or the spouse comes to the gravesite, then they recognize him and they understand who that is. And it comes from different hadith and different opinions from some of the tabi'een and other things, if you will. Right? Another question that we have in life, talking about life in the grave, is do the souls in barzakh, the life in the grave we call it, dar barzakh, if you will, do they visit each other? Meaning that when you pass away, would you see your relative that passed before you? Would you see your parents? If you have siblings, if you have your grandparents, if you will, old friend from school that maybe passed away, would you be able to visit other souls? And one thing is that there is a verse in the Quran in Surah Nisa where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that whoever obeys Allah and His Messenger, and those will be with those whom Allah has bestowed favor of from the prophets, and said those who are truth, the martyrs and the righteous. So the scholars have took that this is a guarantee that when you pass away, you will be with those that you love, if you will, with the righteous, if you will. And obviously your family is part of that. And there's a couple other hadith that's mentioned that your family members will be waiting for you when you pass away. That they are waiting to see that soul. And they'll come and the souls will visit each other. You'll see your mom, your dad, and you'll embrace. And these are souls, not physical bodies, so I'm not too sure how it's hugging or what's going on, but they're embracing each other. And they'll ask about how is so-and-so? What happened to this person? What happened to that person? And you'll start relating news to them about what happened there. And so they'll combine and they'll talk and they'll discuss everything. Of course, it's quite joyous. If you're in bliss, remember this. And then some people say, where is so-and-so? He passed away before me. I don't see him. Which means what? That person is on the other side. That person's probably being punished. Right? And we're going to go over a long hadith that mentions some of these things, if you are. And they say, oh, woe to him that he didn't make it. Right? So if you see someone missing, you kind of got the indication of what's going on. Obviously, that's quite sad. Of course, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us all from that. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. Another question that they have is, do the deceased, the souls, visit the souls that are alive? What do I mean by that? So there's a verse in Surah Zumar where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and I alluded to this, where Allah says Allah takes the souls at the time of their death. That's understood. And those that do not die, He takes them during their sleep. So those souls are still alive, me and you. When we go to sleep, Allah takes that soul. I alluded to this earlier. Then He keeps those which He has decreased death for, and releases the other for a specified term. So if you think about every night, Allah takes our souls and then decides, you know what, it's going to be put back. Right? So every night there's a decision that's being made, which is quite scary. That's why before, there's a hadith of a sahabi, and before he went to sleep, the Prophet used to say that he's a man of Jannah. And some other sahabi kind of followed him and said, what's so great that you do? He said, before I go to sleep, I forgive anyone that's did wrong to me. I go to sleep with a pure heart. So it means that if you do pass away, let's be realistic tonight, right? That's what Allah ordains for me or you or anyone, that inshallah we want to make sure we go in that state. We don't know if that soul is going to be back in the morning. We all know probably people have passed away. I have an uncle that did the same, passed away in his sleep and never woke up. They have no signs that anything was wrong. You never know, right? So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that He takes the souls, and those who He wants to return back, He returns those souls back. Indeed, there's a sign for people who have thought. The scholars have mentioned that since Allah takes those souls already deceased and those are alive, as if they mix together. And they said these are going back and these are coming with me for death, if you will. So some scholars mentioned that the souls who are alive, me and you today, and those already passed, they mix, they see each other. Which goes into a bigger discussion about dreams. Now, if anyone ever had someone close to them pass away, I almost guarantee, or a family member, a mother or a father, I almost guarantee you had a dream about them. Probably the day or that night of the burial, right? And they probably had a conversation sometimes, right? And you want to know, hold on, is that true? Is that real? I mean, my own father, when he passed away, and he was a diabetic for a very long time, like 40-something years. I remember I had a dream, and I saw him on the couch, and I remember he was like drinking something sweet, and I was like, Dad, what are you doing? You don't drink these things. He goes, Shahid, I don't have to take insulin anymore. I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, you don't have to. And I remember then the dream ended. It was very weird. I told my mom about that. I was like, who knows if that was true if that's something I was thinking about. So the scholars said that, dreams are three types. Number one, they're from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's a sign. Maybe don't take this job, or don't marry this person, or make up with this person before your life ends, or whatever that is, right? We all have all type of different dreams, right? And I'm not a person to interpret dreams, so please don't come in afterwards. I don't know how to do that. It's very confusing. And then there's dreams from shaitan, where shaitan himself, which is kind of weird now, that he could make himself in the image of whatever he wants to. So even a family member, and come into your dream, right? And do all this type of stuff. Of course, his job is trying to mislead you, and that's what he does. So there's dreams that are from shaitan. People have nightmares, which usually are from shaitan, as the Prophet said, right? These are from shaitan, and you should do certain things when you wake up, and adhkar, etc. And then there's dreams that what our soul kind of, if you will, speaks of. For example, if you think about buying a car all day long, should I buy this car, Toyota, Nissan, what? And you go to sleep that night, there's a good chance you might dream about buying a car. It just happens, right? You guys all know this, right? It is something you were doing the whole day, and it was stuck in your head, so guess what? You dreamed about it, right? And we have those type of dreams, right? So some of them could be true, that either because our souls meet up with those who have passed away, and they discuss things, that could be possible. And there's Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah. A lot of stuff I'm pulling here from this lecture is a book by Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah called Al-Ruh, the soul. I think they translate it in English. You can probably buy it off Amazon. But he brings multiple narrations of the righteous and the tabi'een that saw other scholars in their dream and they talked to them and so forth. I decided not to bring those stories in here, but anyhow, those could be true, those cannot be true. But anyhow, this is one thing the scholars have mentioned from there. I could take questions at the same time. I have a feeling a lot of people might have questions about that. Anyone? We're good? Alhamdulillah. Next thing we have is a punishment in the grave. Yeah, I know you guys want to cover this topic, but we have to cover the topic. So punishment in the grave is something real. And it's mentioned that people would, almost like everybody would face it. To the extent that the Prophet talked about Mu'adh ibn Jabal, rahimahullah. And he was a very righteous Sahabi. Like very, very righteous. And when he passed away, the Prophet said that when he passed away, even the grave squeezed him a little bit, just a touch. But even him, he still went through that, if you will, right? So imagine anyone else other than him, which gets you to start thinking. Right? Of course, we can still ask Allah subhanahu to protect us, obviously. Definitely make that dua. So that's what happens there. The Prophet ﷺ gives us, talks about how the punishment of the grave is true, and how there's a verse in the Quran that talks about how Fir'aun, that in his grave, the fire is presented to him in the morning and in the night. So it's a proof in the Quran that this is the punishment in the grave that Fir'aun is facing. I think Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, you really can't see the translation there, because it's hard to read, that he says, and after that, then he will have a more severe punishment, talking about in the day of judgment, in Jahannam, if you will. Okay? So here that there is a long hadith here, or hadith about different punishments, that the Prophet ﷺ, one time after Fajr, one time after Salah, he turned around, and usually after Fajr, this is what he would do. He would turn around to the Sahaba and ask anyone if they have seen a dream. And if they had any dreams, he would interpret it for them. And no one saw a dream that day. So he said, you know what, I saw a dream. Let me tell you about my dream. He said, 2 people came to me and brought me to Al-Quds, Jerusalem. And when I was there, they brought me by a person. And this person that was bending down, and there was another person at the side of him. And he had a hook in his hand, and he was putting it in his mouth, and he was ripping his jaw all the way to the side of his jaw, ripping his mouth open. And he said every time he would rip his mouth, the skin will come back together, and the man will do that again. And he would keep on doing it over and over and over again. Imagine seeing this. So the Prophet says that, asked the 2 men that he was with, what's going on here? What is that? He said, don't ask right now. Let's keep going. So he said, okay. Then they went next, and they found a man that was lying down on the ground. And there was another man over him with a big rock. And was taking that rock and was crushing his head. And crushing his skull. And every time he would crush his skull, that rock will roll away. The man will go over and go get that rock, and by the time he comes back, the man's head will come back together. And he will break his head, he will crush his skull again, and that will continue happening over and over again. And the Prophet said, what is that? The man said, don't worry, I'll tell you later, let's go, keep going. They went, and the Prophet saw another thing where he saw like a pot, if you will. A humongous thing in the ground, almost looked like a pot. And below of it was fire inside. And they looked inside and saw men and women. That the fire will go up really high and they will crawl up to the top. And they'll get to the top, but since it's curved, they slip and they fall back down. And he said these men and women were naked. They had no clothes on. And they're getting burnt over and over again. So the Prophet said, what is that? They said once again, don't ask, we will tell you later. Then next they went over to another person. And there was a river, kind of like that river there. And it was a river of blood. And there's people in there that were swimming in it, and they're trying to get to the shore to save themselves. Because they're drowning in it. And there's people on the shore with rocks, and they'll keep on throwing it at them, and the people get hit, and they keep on falling back. And they'll try to swim back again, they'll keep hit, and they'll keep on doing it over and over again. So the Prophet said, what is this? What is going on here? He said, don't worry, we'll tell you later on. Then they walked, and they found a very nice garden. And there was an old man sitting next to a tree, and there was young kids playing with him. And then he walked by him, and after that, they climbed up that tree, and they went to a house. And they climbed up again, and they went to another house that was very more beautiful. And then the Prophet looked up, and he saw a big cloud, and it was very beautiful looking. He said, what is that? He said, you know what? That is your house for you over there. He said, can I go to it? He said, your time is not yet. Your time hasn't come yet. He said, who are you two? He said, I'm Jibril, and this one's Mikael. We're the two angels. So can you tell me what happened? He said, yes. He said, that person that you saw that was getting their mouth ripped open, right? That was the first person. This person, what he was doing is that he was a person that would keep on telling lies. And it says in the Hadith, very interesting, that the lie will carry and go to all over the earth. During the Prophet's time, they probably didn't make any sense. What does that mean? Well, we all know today, you could post something online, on Facebook, or text a group, and that will go to family members all over the place, wouldn't it? Or go to all different people. But these people used to lie so much, and they'll deceive everybody. And so now they're getting punished here. And it said for the second person, that their head was getting crushed. He said, this is a person, this is quite scary for all of us. There was a person who learned the Quran. Maybe not hafiz of the Quran, but they knew ayat, they knew about the Quran, what to do. But they never practiced it. And also the Hadith mentions that they would sleep and they will not recite Quran. Meaning some scholars said that either they'll miss Fajr or they'll miss Salat Isha. Some people say they didn't pray Tahajjud, which is very severe. That gets all of us in trouble now, right? But that they knew the Quran, but they didn't practice it. So their mind is getting crushed because this mind didn't help you in this world. You knew the verses, but it didn't work, so might as well crush it because it didn't do anything. It wasn't working for you. Next person is a person that was in that pot. Remember that? They were naked. The man said, no, these are people who did fornication and adultery. They watched those images on their websites. They watched these type of movies. They did these acts. And guess what? Now they want to be together. They're together now. But now they're under a pit of fire now. And they're getting punished over and over again. And the last people in that river of blood were people who are involved in interests, banking, and those type of dealings, if you will. So here's that they took all the blood from people by sucking out their wealth. So now they're into blood and they're getting pushed back here. If you notice here, that this is not talking about the day of judgment. This is talking about the grave. Because if you look at the end of the hadith, what did I say? That the Prophet wanted to go to his house. He said, no, your time hasn't come yet. Meaning what? He's still living. This is not Jannah yet, if you will. This was happening in Darul Barzakh. In the life of the grave, these people are experiencing this, if you will. They said, what happened? Who was that person there? He said, that was Ibrahim alayhi salam, and that was his offspring that was next to him. And then he said that house was a house of the different houses of Jannah. When they get up, they get obviously more beautiful, if you will. So you have this hadith here that explains all these different things for people, how people get punished in the grave, and obviously that's something that we all should take heed of. Now there's other things that I mentioned, what also that gives you punishment in the grave. There's numerous things. We have when it comes down to it, almost like everything, honestly, if you read the books, there's almost everything that you do, there's a punishment in the grave. Obviously for people who don't make tawbah before they die. That's the caveat here. That they don't ask for forgiveness before they go into the grave for that sin. But everything, one of the things that the Prophet mentioned is people who make namima. What is namima? Namima is not backbiting. But namima means that when you say something to somebody to cause them to hate someone else, to pit people together. You know this guy, what he said next to you? You know what he said about your wife? Oh yeah, he said it. And they do that just to get people to kind of start bickering. Even if it's true, this is what they do. So you get punishment in the grave for that, they mentioned. The Prophet also, one time he passed by a grave, and he says that, I could hear these two people right now, they're getting punished. And he said that you're lucky you don't hear them being punished. Because if Allah would allow you to hear the punishment in the grave, you wouldn't bury your dead. You would just keep them above the ground. You wouldn't put them in the ground anymore because you know what would happen. And you will fall dead of the sound of the punishment. And only the animals could hear this punishment. That's what the Prophet mentioned in the Hadith. And then he said, these two people are being punished. He said, why are they being punished? He said, they're being punished for not something you might think that are really big. Number one was doing namima, was pitting people together. And number two, the other one wasn't very careful when he would use the bathroom, and urine will get on his clothes. That's why us Muslims are very, very particular about using the bathroom. That's why you always have that sign, please sit down when you use the bathroom. It's not because they don't want you urinating on the ground and dirtying the seat. That's one thing, right? That's normal hygiene. But to protect your own self, so any splashing that might come up on you, like over here we have a bowl that has water, and back home they didn't have that. It just goes in a hole. If you think about it, it's a lot better. There's no splashing there. But here, you get yourself in trouble, right? So here it's also to take that precaution when you use the bathroom there, right? Another thing, the backbiting was one that was mentioned. Another one the Prophet mentioned is, the scholars mentioned, is seeing someone being oppressed, madloom, and not assisting them. That's quite scary. To see someone being oppressed, getting hurt, someone stealing someone's purse, and you don't do anything about it. You let that go on, if you will. Obviously, you have to watch out for yourself. Don't get yourself hurt also, right? But to see people getting oppressed and doing injustice, and you don't do anything to assist them. This is another thing that will get somebody in punishment of the grave. How do we protect ourselves from the grave? This is my last point here. The Prophet said in a hadith, where a lot of scholars said it's weak, but nonetheless, a lot of scholars said it's good to still practice it, because if it ends up being true, then alhamdulillah we'll protect ourselves, is that Prophet said there's 30 verses in the Quran, if you would recite it at night or daily, that will protect you from the punishment of the grave. And that is Surah Mulk. Right? Surah Mulk obviously is not that long to memorize, about 2 pages and 1/4, if you will, right? To recite that, make that part of your adhkar when you put your head down at nighttime. Add that in, right? Of other things that you do, then inshallah ta'ala this will protect you in the grave. There's another hadith that's mentioned in Ibn Hibban, where the Prophet mentioned that when a person puts in the grave and a punishment comes to them, that the person used to pray a lot. If the person would pray a lot, that their salah will come in a form of a barrier. Like I said, it's hard to understand that. But it will come in a form of a barrier, and it will make a barrier at the person's head. So the punishment will come, and it won't be able to get through. And then it says that the fasting of that person that we do, the Ramadan and the extra fasting that we do, will come to the right side of that person and make another barrier. So when punishment comes, it will hit that, and it won't be able to get to you. And then the Prophet mentions that on the left side, your zakat, that obligation of giving out, that charity, if you will, we all know that very well, will come to your left side, and it will cause another barrier. So if the punishment tries to come from the left, it will get blocked. And then the Prophet says, and all the other good deeds that you do, from charity, voluntary charity, to keeping good family tidings, to commanding good and forbidding evil, all that stuff, helping others, will come to your foot, and it will block the punishment coming towards your foot from that way. So you have all 4 ways blocking punishment. And that's, like I said, from us doing good deeds in this world, we're giving ourselves insurance in the hereafter. Right? We're protecting our own self, if you think about it there. And then, of course, dua. You all know that to make dua, right? You ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right, to protect us from the punishment of the grave. A'idhu min adhab al-qabr wa adhab an-nar, from the punishment of the grave and the punishment of the fire. This is a dua we usually make when in Salatul Janazah. So it's something that we always should make on a daily note after Salah or in your Salah, etc. So these are some of the things that I wanted to go about the life of the grave. I want to ask, does anyone have any questions or anything from what I said or something that I didn't cover that you have inquiry about or you'd like to know about? Go ahead. Good question, good question. So she's saying that sometimes it takes 2 or 3 days, depends on the coroner. Some people want to fly their body to different lands to bury it, which is not necessarily recommended, but anyhow. And so what she's asking, what happens to the soul at that moment, or what's going through there, right? So we understand the soul comes up and it goes back down and it's united with the body. So the soul's in that body there until it gets buried into the grave site there, and then we have the questioning there. So it returns back to what we understand, to that body, wherever it is. If it's in a morgue, if it's in the hospital, if it's wherever it's being kept, it reunites back into that body there. So it's still together, if you will, right? So we have that there until it gets obviously buried. It comes back. Yeah. How long is that whole trip we mentioned? I mean, I don't know the time frame for that. I'm not too sure, but whatever that is, it will come back eventually. Obviously, it has to come back to the body for questioning. Which is another question that scholars bring up, is that the punishment in the grave, is that for the soul or that's for the body? Like, what gets actually punished? So the scholars have mentioned the majority opinion is that both. That it's, because if you think about it, you're in a world between both, if you will, right? So it said that the physical body will get punished, and what? And the soul will get punished, right? If a person's going to get punished. Like I said, inshallah ta'ala, we ask Allah to protect us from that. I mean. But here is that both of them will get punished. And maybe some of you heard stories, and I've heard stories before, where people have been dug up after. There's a story where they had to dig that body up to find something, or I forgot exactly what the reason was, and they found out the body was like black and blue, even after like hours that was in the grave. And it looked like someone beat it up, and they didn't know how to explain it. Whether these stories are true or not, I mean, I've heard it from multiple people. Allahu A'lam. There's another very famous story that's mentioned that they were putting a body in the grave, and there was a snake, a black snake that was there. And so they said they dug another grave, and when they looked in there, that same snake appeared again. And they said that, they mentioned in this story that they dig 30 different grave sites. And they finally said, you know what, they couldn't, and that snake would appear every single time in the grave itself. And they said, you know what, they said, we're just going to put the body down, and maybe that's its punishment for the body, if you will. And there's all the different things that, that, I don't, like, you ever bury someone, sometimes you see things you can't really explain. There's another story of a Shaykh that was burying a body, and it was a lady, or it could be, it doesn't matter if it was a lady or a man, but it was a body. And what happened is that body would end up being so heavy, and they couldn't put it in the grave. Like, it ended up being, and there was so much men there that was helping to put the body in the grave, but it just wouldn't move. And so what's going on? And so the Shaykh said he started reciting Quran. And he said he started Quran, and so the body started becoming really light afterwards. And they finally were able to put it into the grave. And he says that somebody tapped that Shaykh that was trying to tell him something, that we're going to go back to the masjid after. So the Shaykh stopped reciting. And so the body became so heavy that the man that was holding it, they fell down inside the grave itself. And then there ends up time, finally at the end, that the family member finally came and told the Shaykh, the issue that was my mother. And you know what, I looked and I saw her face. I wanted to look at her face one more time, but that wasn't the face of my mother. I know that's my mother we're burying, but that wasn't her face. It was all black and looked very different. But one thing, you know what, Shaykh, I wanted to tell you that, she used to never pray. She was Muslim, but she just never prayed. Thought that was like old school. That was the Prophet's time. We have to make wudu, and we're different. It's modern day thing. And so she never was a person that prayed. And it could be why? Because the soul doesn't want to go in that grave because it knows what's going to happen. Right? And that's why, when back on your question, is that it's good to to hurry the body, because the soul, if it could speak once again, it's like, please put me in the grave. I want to get this bliss. I want to get out of this world of tiredness and sicknesses and pollutions. Right? But if it's a bad soul, it'd say, don't put me in that grave, because I don't want to go to the punishment. Right? Do you have a follow-up question? Sorry, say it again. The dua for the deceased? Yeah, that's a third thing right there. Yeah, dua. Definitely, of course. I will always, even people who don't know you, any type of dua that they're doing for you will definitely help you, inshallah ta'ala. Any other questions people have? Go ahead, sister. Okay, so there's the question she asked about for my parents. If someone's parents is not Muslim, So are you talking about what happens to them in the grave, or what exactly you're asking for?
Well, for instance, my father just passed away in November, and my family, my siblings, decided to play music right there at the grave.
And he was Muslim?
No,
Your father wasn't Muslim, and they were playing music on the grave. Okay, so your question
so
is
that like punishment for them?
for your father? You know, there's a hadith where the Prophet says that the wailing, like the overall crying of people just, losing themselves, not just a crying of sorrow, but just losing themselves and wailing, if you will, and tearing clothes and pulling hair and stuff, will be a punishment for that person in the grave. Okay, and some scholars debated what does that actually mean, but obviously we don't have a hadith about playing music. But if that is a non-Muslim, that is a whole nother realm of what we just kind of went over. We kind of went over about a soul that wasn't a believer. All due respect to your father, I have no way to judge that at all. I'm just telling you that. But what we know of someone is a bad soul, we went over that exactly what happens there of that soul being carried in a very garment of Jahannam and so forth. That's what we understand. So that whether music is being played or whatever they're doing on the top, and that probably won't do much for them. I could say that on a little side note. There is a hadith that is mentioned here that not 100% related to you, that about people like to put like flowers at grave sites, right? We all know this, very like American tradition. I'm not too sure if they do it in other lands, if you will. But there is a hadith that's in Bukhari where the Prophet ﷺ walked by a grave site, and he had two stakes, like two like palm branches, and he stuck it at the side of at the grave site. Not necessarily in decoration, but he put it there. And then they asked him, why did you do that, O Rasulullah? He said, perhaps their torture will be lightened for them for as long as these do not dry up, for until they dry up. So whether that is some type of assurance for them or something, I'm not too sure. So some people say that this is yours with music is a little different, but if we're talking about flowers or something else, that maybe there's a little avenue for doing that for the deceased, even someone who's Muslim, if you will. One time the Prophet also, when he went by a grave, I believe it was for either his son or someone else, he like cleaned it. There was like branches and kind of dirt on the top there, and he moved and he kind of cleaned it out to make it look kind of good, out of respect for that, if you will. So that's something you do. When you go to the gravesite, you could kind of, not decorate it. We don't do those type of things, but you make it look nice, if you will. That's part of respect of there. That's the same thing with tombstones and so forth, is that we don't do usually tombstones, we do like plates. That is allowed to do to identify that spot, right? Some people have a question on that. We don't build monuments, right, and do different things, but if you want to put I guess it's called a tombstone, right? I don't know if there's another name for it, but where they put the name of that person and whatever, that's fine, because at least so you know where that person is when you want to go and visit them or make dua or something. In Islam, we have nothing wrong with that. That's for marking purposes, but not for trying to show that person was a great person or something like that, or decorating, if you will. Gravestones, that's what it's called, right? Good. Any other questions people had before we, sister, go ahead.
So I know you can be rewarded in the grave if people do things in your name or for you, but can you be punished in the grave if people do bad things in your name?
No, alhamdulillah, or else we'll all be in big trouble, right? So well, we all know that that you could give sadaqat, right, in charity for a deceased family member or friend or anyone, honestly. People go out and do all type of things for the prophets. I donate this money. Prophet ﷺ already has no sin. If you're doing it out of honor of him, I guess so. But obviously, do it for people that kind of need help, if you will, right? So you could do that for your family members, of this donation to the masjid or building of this, or Hajj or Umrah. If they didn't do that, you could do it on their name. As long as you did your own Hajj already, then you could do it for you. But you have to take care of yourself first and foremost. The scholars have debated about reading Quran, that you could read Quran and ask Allah, can this ajr of me reading this Quran go to that deceased? And there's a little debate on that. Some scholars say that it's okay and that is allowed to do so. And so these different things you could do to benefit someone who passed away. Now doing something on someone else's name, then obviously that wouldn't affect that, unless they left something that's harming people, right? And that is continuing harming people, then that will still go on their record, right? I'm trying to think about an example of that right now, but I don't have anything in my head. But that would be like the only type of case, if you will. But if they don't have everything that didn't leave that was harming someone, then they only can get benefit if someone does it good on their name, if you will. Any other questions? Ibrahim, go ahead. I just know from the mouth, from the cheek to the jawbone. They mentioned that for those who lie and spread the lies that covers the whole earth. It wasn't just a small lie; it was something bigger, if you will. Right? And if you think about it, this punishment goes on day in, day out, day in, day out. It's not like a small thing, right? And those who are in bliss, you will be blissed for a long time. It's mentioned that you'll see your place in Jannah in the morning and the afternoon. You will see your place in Jannah in the morning and afternoon. I don't know about you, but that will give you a lot of reassurance when you're in that life in the grave, if you will. Like as if you're a good person, alhamdulillah, you have your good companion there. You might see other souls, so it actually, alhamdulillah, might not be as bad as somebody might think. But you'll see your place in Jannah in the morning and the afternoon. And if you're a person that's a bad soul, they'll see their place in Jahannam in the morning and afternoon. The question that comes up here, if you have this question in your head, I have the same question in my head, is that if you can see your place in Jannah, doesn't that kind of ruin the Day of Judgment? If you see your place in Jannah, then when you go on the judgment, you're like, well, I kind of remember I'm supposed to go to Jannah, so inshallah this should go well, right? So you will think that. But the thing is, though, even though Allah SWT showed you a place in Jannah in the grave, that's just for consoling and for solace. But when the Day of Judgment starts, you will forget that, believe me. There's so many things going on, so much anxiety, so much worry, that you will forget those type of things. We all know that sometimes when an earthquake happens, we all know what we're supposed to do. But you get so scared, you just jump and you run over there, you forget to even look for your kids or your spouse. You're just trying to, even though you know you're supposed to do that. Or if you get in a car accident, you know what you're supposed to do, but sometimes you don't even call the police, you're just so ecstatic, right? The Day of Judgment is going to be like 10 times like that. You won't even remember about that bliss in the grave, and I saw the nice garment of Jannah. That is like, it's so many things you're worrying about, so much different things you're seeing, the sun and the moon crashing into each other. The sights is going to, obviously just awe you, if you will. So just to answer that question, if you had that question in your head. Anything else before we wrap up? Inshallah. Yeah. So so I mentioned is the reward for the pious person, right? So you asked me if they're not following the right path? So like a non-Muslim or a Muslim that's not there? Well, they'll have trouble with that whole questioning there. Because, which one? So if the father and mother passed away, and their kids, what about the kids? Oh, I see what you're trying to say. Okay, I see what you're saying. So, okay, kind of like what that sister's saying, asked a question, that if parents didn't train their kids how to pray and do certain things, so when they pass away, they're getting punished because they didn't train their kids to pray, and their kids is living this crazy life or life of disobedience. They will get the punishment of that in this world from not training their kids how to pray. Once that's over, then that's done. Once that child gets to the age of, we say the age of reasoning, the age of puberty, it's on their own, right? They call the age of reason. They're supposed to find out that, if their parents never taught them that, then they'll have that in their sin column, if you will. But that wouldn't continue as a kid grows up in their 20s and 30s and 40s and never was a good person. Now that doesn't keep on going there. As Allah SWT mentioned in the Quran, like you don't bear the sin of another person. Right? So therefore they might get the sin of just not bring up their children upright, and that's it. It stops there. Whether that's 1 or 20 or 100 sins, whatever that is, but then that's it. It doesn't keep on multiplying, if you will. So that's a good, I see your question. Go ahead. Where's that microphone at? I don't know.
So I have a question. Two questions, actually. One, I wanted to know, does the manner by which someone dies...
Could you put the mic up a little?
The manner by which someone dies, does that have any reflection on what's going to happen to their souls? I mean, I know it's kind of complicated, but, so if someone dies and, like, they're peacefully die while they're sleeping versus, like, I don't know.
Very good. So there's
some very tragic way, or, dying from cancer or something, something that's very, very painful. And that's my first question. My second question is there any bearing on any, sometimes I've heard that people, their janazah prayer,
Yeah.
like the number of people that show up to their prayer, is that a reflection of, sometimes people talk about like the means at the end, the way the person goes, you'll hear people like, oh, he must have been a good person, this is how they passed, or this person, must have done something, this bad happened, or nobody came to the janazah, or so many people came, like, felt like angels were filling the room, things like that.
Right. I see exactly what you're saying. No, good question. I'll handle that question first, so I'll answer your second question. So just having a lot of people at your janazah will basically, the deceased will benefit from that is that they'll have X more times of that dua get in place for them now. So obviously, if it's only 10 people showing up someone's janazah, that's 10 people standing up. If you think a salatul janazah is a dua, if you really think about it, it's a dua standing up. It's not really, we call it salah, but it's not really a salah. It's more of a dua, if you will. And so now you have 10 people making dua for that deceased. If you have 10 or 20 rows, you have like 500 people now making dua for that deceased. And of course, the more dua, the better for that deceased. And there might be people who are much more sincere that inshallah they'll get accepted. That's how the deceased will benefit from more people coming to the janazah. I don't know if there's a hadith that says X amount of people come to a janazah that they'll have some type. Shaykh Bilal, do you know anything about that? Have you heard that? I've tried to put you on the spot right there. I thought there was something like that. But anyhow, that's one way to answer that. Number two, in terms of how somebody passes away and how does that, is that a sign of goodness or anything else? One thing, there's a hadith in Tirmidhi. I'm trying to pull it up on my laptop and I can't find it right now, but there's a hadith in Tirmidhi where the Prophet ﷺ, I'm summarizing the hadith, that said that a man will go through trials on this earth and keep on going trials on earth until Allah takes away all the sins from him, and then he will pass away. Meaning that, and that's one, if you think about that, it makes kind of sense that majority of people, I don't know what a percentage would be, but the majority of people usually go through some type of sickness when they pass away, right? And they're usually like a month or two or years, if you will, of some type of sickness. And so that could be Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala trying to filter their sins before they pass away. Because we know that there was another hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, that even a prick of a thorn of a rose bush or of a plant will be an expiation of a sin. A bump in your knee on the wall will be an expiation of your sin. A sickness that you go through will be an expiation of sins that you have. So if somebody goes through cancer for a year or 2 years and chemo and all that, different things like that, it seems kind of bad on the outside. But if you think about it, Allah could say, I have a plan for you. You might not understand it, but I'm trying to filter all those sins out of you so when you go in the grave, you have a great time. But so sometimes we have to understand trials like that. And so it's not necessarily the way they die might be a sign that they were a bad person. Yes, there is definitely signs for that, whether it's a car accident, whether this or that, whatever the case may be. But you can't necessarily say every single car accident is a sign of a bad person. That's very hard to put on, if you will, to say that, just label that in general. But here that we have that this, from the saying of the Prophet ﷺ, that people go through different trials before they pass away, it could be that this is a good for them, not necessarily a bad thing for them, if you will. So that's something we should take into mind.
People go there and what about Janatul Baqi in Medina to Munawwara? People say that people go there and throw away their passports and stay there to die, to get buried in Janatul Baqi. Is there any hadith or anything that mentions that the torments of the grave is less in Baqi?
I think there is a narration. Honestly, I can't recall it from my head. But doing sin to get goodness doesn't work. So if for someone overstaying their visa to try to die, to pass away over there, the intention sounds good, but the route is not very well. So that you can't do sin to get good. That doesn't make any sense too. So that's. But if they just end up, they say they go there for a Hajj or Umrah and they end up passing away, and they go there, I think there's some type of benefit for being buried there. I think there's a hadith on there, but honestly, I cannot pull it up from my head right now, unfortunately. But maybe I can get back to you, inshallah ta'ala. Any other questions? Oh, there you go. Not a good Muslim, are they punished? It's a suffering for them. That, because I mentioned if it's a good soul, they want to go there. So it's actually, like I said, if the soul would speak, like they'll say, like, what are you guys doing? Get me into the grave now, because I want to be there. Because the soul doesn't want to be in a body anymore. For there, it's... Well, okay. Well, if that's the case, if people don't know how to bury them, they don't know the procedures, that's a little different. That's not on them, right? So therefore, no, I mean, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, obviously, with His mercy, will understand those conditions, that they're not doing it. But yeah, inshallah, hopefully that would be the case. I mean, I don't know exact narration for something like that. But yeah, not because they're purposely doing it, or if someone just doesn't know, if the hospital is saying we need to keep them back, or the coordinator, the paper at work hasn't come in, this happens a lot, then obviously that's not something that's doing. Obviously that's why we want to bury immediately. The Prophet always said that to do it as fast as you can. That's why even, we do a little bit different here at this masjid, but I've seen other masajid that even after the Dhuhr Salah, they say don't pray your sunnah, we're going to do janazah right now. Because it's actually, that's more of urgency to do a janazah than our salatul sunnah. Even though it's only like 3 minutes if you think about it, or 5 minutes. So, but to do that as quick as possible to get that body in there, if you will. But it's not necessarily a punishment if they don't, the coroner is holding it and so forth like that. Inshallah ta'ala, those circumstances are out of our control. Right, so inshallah ta'ala, hopefully Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will have the mercy there, if you will, with that. Good question though, I understand what you're saying there.
Assalamu alaikum. One more question. As you mentioned, when people pass away and the sibling or relative goes and pray at the graveyard, so you said they hear you, right?
That's one opinion, yes.
Is it recommended to go and make dua over there?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, definitely. Don't make dua to the grave, but make Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, obviously. Definitely. The Prophet encouraged visiting the grave. So if you sit there and you read Quran, inshallah, it might be a soothing for them. There's reward for that, obviously, just for your own self. Making dua, obviously, for them is great to do it there. You can do it at home, but you might be more sincere if you're there at the gravesite.
Yeah,
so
that's why I asked, because a lot of people say that they're already passed away, so their body, just the body is there, ruh is not there. So they don't listen. You can make dua anywhere. You don't have to go to the graveyard. Right. So, but as you are mentioning that it is good to go because they feel happy, right? And they feel that they recognize you. So it just,
it'll be a comfort for them. Yeah, to go there and read Quran or make dua for them. And so they'll recognize your voice or recognize that there. Because there's a hadith where the Prophet mentioned that when someone says salam to the Prophet ﷺ, Allah returns his soul to him, and he conveys the salams back to that person. Some people say this hadith is only special for the Prophet ﷺ, but some people say this is general, this for all souls, right? Which you can go into those two different opinions. But there's other proof that they use for this, that the soul comes back to the body there, and they hear that person. Obviously, they can't respond. We all know that, but that might be an assurance for them and solace for them if you think about it.
Are ladies allowed to go to the graveyard?
Yeah, definitely.
Yes? I thought...
the issue is with Salatul Janazah. That's where the hadith is spoken about women going to a janazah, if you will. Mostly all scholars have a disliking for that, from all the madahib that I know of. But at the same time, almost all scholars make exception for women and say that it's good for them to go. They could stand kind of farther away. They shouldn't wail. They shouldn't dress up attractively. This is not the time for that. They shouldn't make their beautify themselves. So they put a lot of conditions, but they make us at the end that they should go, even though they kind of said there might be some disliking to it. But that's a stronger opinion. That's why a lot of times you see at a cemetery that during the burial they have like a little section for sisters kind of off to the side, which is, I think that's totally fine. And obviously they control themselves in their wailing and so forth like this. And they would make some strong exceptions for the family members, whether if it's the spouse or the children, daughters for their parents, to come there and see the body, because it's impactful for them. Go ahead, sister. Can you read Quran to a nana? This is very new questions that I've never been asked for. one thing, the Quran is shifa. Whether it would benefit someone who's a non-Muslim in a grave, I'm not too sure. But I mean, I wouldn't stop someone from reading Quran ever. So at least for certain situations. But here, I would, yeah, you could read at a gravesite. You could, I don't know how. Now, does that benefit the non-Muslim in the grave? I wouldn't think so. But I mean, at the same time, I honestly, I don't know. But I won't stop someone from wanting to do that. That I will give the green light to. But I want to know what the effect would be on there. I need to look that up. Yeah. A good question, though. Yeah, go ahead, sister.
My question is, is there any kind of hadith that says like how long you are in the grave for?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So the time frame. So the time frame is until the angel, we know, Israfil blows the horn, and that resurrects everyone out of the grave. So people who died during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, they're still in that time frame, whatever that is, 1400 years now. People during Musa time, I don't know, what is that? 3,000 years, 6,000 years, I don't know. So they've been there ever since Adam alayhi salam. Well, he's special, but people during his time has been there for how long? But the thing is, though, what we know from this hadith here, that if you do well, you're in this bliss, though. To extent, you're in a bliss, right? You have a bed of Jannah, you have clothes of Jannah, you have a companion with you. So yes, it's a long, long time. Now at the same time, what is time in the hereafter? Is that 60 seconds equals a minute? Does 60 minutes equal an hour? It might be different, irrelevant. It might not be the way you calculate time there. It's not the same way we do on this earth here. So that's kind of hard to answer that question also there. But definitely for sure, they're all waiting for that horn to blow for everyone that's resurrected out of the ground. So whenever that happens, then everyone will come. Yeah. Sister, go ahead. Brothers only have no questions. You guys know everything, mashallah. I don't know. I should just give a program for the sisters. Go ahead.
They say that a believing soul, when they pass, they say the Shahada. Is that the case for every believing soul? Or what if there's, somebody who passes and they don't say? And I have a second question. You had said something about a car accident. I thought there was a hadith that said like certain people who die in certain situations, like mounting a travel, like mounting or getting off.
Oh,
there.
okay.
I can't remember what, but okay. That they.
Right. Okay. I think I kind of know what you're alluding to. So number one is that. What was your first question? Sorry.
People say shahada when they pass away.
So if someone said, so there's a hadith that if somebody says the shahada, la ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, before they pass away, that they will be granted Jannah. Okay. So they have to say it, right? Their last words. A lot of times, if you see, like I said, if you've seen people pass away, sometimes they have tubes in their mouth. Sometimes they are in a coma. Sometimes they can't talk. So if they're blessed to be able to do so, and that's why it's recommended that if you're around a person that's passing away, do a thing called talqeen, where you should say, La ilaha illallah, La ilaha illallah. Remind them. Don't force it on them, but just kind of whisper it in their ear so they kind of start saying. I've seen someone who was in like coma, and people around them are saying La ilaha, because they thought that person was going to go. And you can see that person's lips, they started saying La ilaha illallah. The eyes is gone. They're gone, like whatever, and someone has semi-coma, and they still said it. It was amazing. I've seen that with my own eyes. But if their last words are this, and they'll go to Jannah according to the hadith, if they're right. So we have that. Whether they get punished and go to Jahannam before that, and then finally go to Jannah, or they go straight to Jannah, that's another thing. But we know as Muslims that even Muslims will go to Jahannam and get purified of their sins, and then go to Jannah later on. Of course, we ask Allah to save us from all that, right? But obviously we don't want to be anywhere part of that, but that's also possible too. So I don't want to say it's like a free ticket. People could just kill and steal, and last words are La ilaha illallah. If you think about it, if someone's doing that, their probably last words are not going to be that. And one thing just also know of there's tons of stories like this. When someone passed away, whatever they used to say during this world, usually that's what's going to happen. And I've seen, once again, I'm not an expert at this, I don't know, I've really only seen 2 people pass away, but I've seen that people that when they're really sick and they're in the hospital, they start saying things that they used to, either songs they used to listen to. I've seen people start singing old songs, either from Bollywood old songs and American old songs, because they're so delirious, because they're so in a state of almost intoxication, because they can't wake up, and whatever you train your soul to do, those might be your last words. And there's tons of stories of people that used to sell, back home, people sell certain type of vegetables. They all say that, you know, whatever it is, like watermelon, watermelon, water, $5, watermelon, $5, water. People say these type of, and they start saying these things when they're passing away. And I've heard stories that these are the words they say as they are going away. That's why the Prophet said, keep your tongue moist with the dhikr of Allah. So you train your tongue to say, La ilaha illallah, La ilaha illallah, while you're waiting in line, while you're driving. So when something happens, then you'll see it. And a lot of us know when something happens, so when we bump our knee on the wall, or actually hit ourselves, what happens? What comes out of our mouth? Right? We don't want to say what happens because we're in the masjid right now, right? But usually it's not like, oh, subhanallah. Usually like, oh, beep, 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 right? Usually. Or something else that comes out. Because it's all like, right? Or you might say, oh, different things. So that kind of a test. If we can't remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when you bump your knee, imagine when you pass away. That's going to be very tough. That's why that reward is for that, for someone to remember Allah right when they're passing away. That's very hard. So don't think it's an easy thing. That's kind of what I want to mention. I think we're going to, one more? Go ahead, inshallah. We'll take the last question because I don't mind staying, but I think people might want to go home.
So I know that sometimes you're punished in the grave because you're to be purified before getting into Jannah if you weren't purified from it here on earth. So does the soul know like that punishment is going to end, or does the soul think that it's going to be punished for all eternity, and then that's like more fear, if that makes sense?
Right. From like, does people get punished for a certain time, then maybe they get blissed like later on?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question, because those hadith I mentioned about the guy's mouth being ripped and so, it looked like from the hadith that his mouth returns back and he gets ripped again. It seems like it's a continuous process that's going on. Like obviously these people are doing really, really bad things. So it could be that someone goes through some type of bliss, some type of punishment, and maybe that might be end later on. Allahu alam, I don't know if there's any sayings from Prophet ﷺ about this, but I haven't read it, but that could be possible. That would make some sense also. If there was a good person, but they slipped up here and there, if you will, that would make sense also, but I can't just guarantee that. Tayyib, in the end, we'll thank everyone, alhamdulillah, for attending this program. We'll make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Ya Rabbil Alameen, Ya Rahman Rahim. We ask you for forgiveness, Ya Rabbil Alameen, for our sins, Ya Kareem. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, make us be able, our last words are the Shahada, Ya Kareem, before we pass away, Ya Rabbil Alameen. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, protect us from the punishment of the grave and the hellfire. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, protect us from the punishment of the grave and the hellfire. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, protect us from the punishment of the grave and the hellfire, Ya Kareem, Ya Rabbil Alameen, Ya Ghafoor. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, our family members who have passed away, we ask you to forgive them and make their graves one of the gardens of Jannah, Ya Kareem, Ya Rabbil Alameen. Make it spacious for them, Ya Rabbil Alameen, and protect them from the punishment of the grave, Ya Kareem, Ya Rabbil Alameen. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun, wa salamun ala al-mursaleen, walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Ameen, Ya Rabbil Alameen. Jazakallah khairan for all you for coming. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you. Hope you benefited. We'll see you next week. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.